The letter from Whitmore and Associates arrived on a Tuesday, 3 days after my grandfather's funeral. I sat in my cramped Chicago apartment, surrounded by moving boxes I hadn't bothered to unpack in 2 years, and stared at the official-looking envelope with its embossed return address. Mr. James Hawthorne, regarding the estate of Theodore Hawthorne, you are hereby notified that you have been named the sole beneficiary of the property located at 1847 Millbrook Lane, Riverside Pines, Oregon. Your presence is requested for the reading of the will and transfer of property rights. I read it 3 times before the words actually registered. Grandpa Ted had left me his house, the old Victorian on 5 acres that had been in the Hawthorne family since 1897. The place where I'd spent every summer as a kid, running through blackberry brambles and swimming in the creek that cut through the property, a place I hadn't visited in 15 years. My phone buzzed. "Mom, did you get a letter?" Her voice was tight, controlled, the way it always got when she was angry but trying not to show it. "Just reading it now. James, you need to be very careful about this." A pause. "Your grandfather, he had specific wishes about that property. Conditions." "What kind of conditions?" "He made me promise not to tell you over the phone." Another pause, longer this time. "Just, when you get there, don't let anyone convince you to sell, no matter what they offer, and whatever you do, don't touch the pump house." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, then back at the letter. The pump house, that old stone structure behind the main house, covered in ivy and moss that Grandpa Ted had always kept padlocked. I'd asked about it once when I was 12. He just smiled his mysterious smile and said, "Some things are better left alone, Jamie. That old pump house has been watching over this land longer than I have. When the time comes, you'll understand." 2 weeks later, I was driving through the wrought iron gates of Riverside Pines, Oregon, population 3,842. The town had changed. Where I remembered modest family homes and local businesses, I now saw manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, and signs every 50 feet. Riverside Pines HOA, maintaining excellence since 2015. My grandfather's property sat at the end of Millbrook Lane, a sprawling Victorian painted in faded blues and grays, surrounded by ancient oaks and wild gardens that had clearly gone untended for months. The contrast with the neighboring properties was stark. To the left, a pristine colonial with a lawn so perfect it looked painted. To the right, a modern farmhouse with strategic landscaping and Edison bulbs strung across a picture-perfect patio. And standing in my driveway, arms crossed, was a woman in a cream-colored blazer and pearls who looked like she'd been waiting for me. "Mr. Hawthorne?" She didn't wait for confirmation. "Margaret Thornwood, president of the Riverside Pines Homeowners Association. We need to talk." I climbed out of my truck, every muscle aching from 14 hours of driving. "Nice to meet you too." Her smile was razor-thin. "I'll be direct. Your grandfather's property has been in violation of HOA standards for quite some time. We gave him leeway due to his age and condition. But now that ownership is transferring, we need to discuss bringing this property into compliance. I just got here 5 minutes ago, which is why I'm here to welcome you and provide you with this." He thrust a thick binder at me. "Complete HOA guidelines, violation notices for your property, and a timeline for remediation. You have 60 days to address the issues outlined in sections 3, 7, and 12. I took the binder, heavy enough to be a weapon. "What issues specifically?" Margaret's eyes gleamed. "The overgrown gardens, the peeling paint, the rusted fence along the eastern property line, and most urgently, that eyesore behind the house, the pump house, if that's what you want to call it. It's a derelict structure that violates our aesthetic standards. It needs to be removed within 30 days. Something in my chest tightened. "Don't touch the pump house." "Look over the guidelines," I said carefully. "But I'm not making any promises about removing something that's been part of this property for over a century." Margaret's smile turned cold. "Mr. Hawthorne, I don't think you understand how HOAs work. These aren't suggestions. When your grandfather's property was incorporated into Riverside Pines boundaries in 2015, it became subject to our covenants and restrictions. You'll comply or you'll face fines, significant fines. My grandfather never agreed to join an HOA. He didn't have to. When the town expanded its limits and established the HOA, all properties within the new boundaries were automatically included. It's all legal, I assure you. The documents are in section 1 of your binder." She turned on her expensive heels and walked back to her white Mercedes, parked at an angle that blocked half my driveway. Before getting in, she called back, "Oh, and welcome to the neighborhood, Mr. Hawthorne. I do hope we can maintain a cordial relationship. It would be such a shame if things got difficult." I watched her drive away, then looked down at the binder in my hands. The cover read, "Riverside Pines HOA, building a better tomorrow together." The lawyer's office was a converted house on Main Street, sandwiched between an artisanal coffee shop and a boutique selling $70 candles. Harold Whitmore looked exactly like his stationery, old, expensive, and slightly yellowed around the edges. "Your grandfather was very specific about his wishes," Harold said, sliding a leather portfolio across his desk. "Before we discuss the property details, he wanted you to have this." Inside was a letter in Grandpa Ted's spidery handwriting, and beneath it an old leather journal I'd never seen before. "Dear Jamie, if you're reading this, I'm gone and the house is yours. I know you haven't been back in years. I know why. Your mother told me about the fights, the things I said when the dementia got bad. I hope you can forgive an old man who didn't always know what was real anymore. But this letter, this journal, is from the real me. The me who's been protecting something important for 60 years, just like my father did for 60 years before me and his father before him. The pump house isn't what it seems. What's underneath it is why we've kept this land in the family for 127 years. Why we've never sold, never subdivided, never let strangers get too close. In 1897, your great-great-grandfather Marcus Hawthorne bought this land from a man named Samuel Blackwood for $1. Sam was dying and he had no family, but he made Marcus promise 3 things. 1. Never sell the land. 2. Never remove the pump house. 3. Never tell anyone what's underneath. Marcus kept that promise. So did everyone after him. Now it's your turn. The HOA will come for you. Margaret Thornwood has been trying to get her hands on this property for 5 years. She doesn't know what's under the pump house, but she knows the land is valuable. She knows if she can force you out, she can develop it. 5 luxury homes, she told me once. Maybe more. Don't let her. The journal will tell you everything. Read it carefully. And Jamie, when the time is right, you'll know what to do. I love you, boy. I always did, even when I couldn't remember your name. Grandpa Ted, my hands shook as I opened the journal. The first entry was dated March 15, 1897, written in elaborate Victorian script. Today I made a promise to a dying man that will change my family forever. Sam showed me what lies beneath the old pump house. I confess I did not believe him at first. But I have seen it with my own eyes now, and I understand why he spent his entire life protecting this secret. It is not mine to reveal to the world. Perhaps it never will be. But it is mine to protect, and protect it I shall until my last breath. I looked up at Harold. What's under the pump house? The old lawyer's expression was carefully neutral. Your grandfather never told me. He said it was safer that way, but he did leave instructions for me to give you this. He produced a small brass key on a chain. He said you'd know when to use it. That's it. That's all he told you. He also told me that if Margaret Thornwood or anyone from the HOA pressures you to sell or remove any structures, I was to remind you of one thing. Harold leaned forward. You're not the first Hawthorne she's tried to intimidate. Your grandfather fought her in court twice, won both times. The documentation is all in here. He tapped another folder. Precedent is on your side, James. Your property rights predate the HOA by over a century. They can send all the violation notices they want, but they can't actually force you to do anything. Then why did Grandpa Ted seem so worried in his letter? Harold's expression darkened. Because Margaret Thornwood doesn't give up. When she wants something, she finds a way to get it, legal or otherwise. I spent the rest of the day cleaning out the main house, trying not to think about the pump house out back. But as the sun set, painting the overgrown garden in shades of gold and amber, I found myself walking toward it. The structure was exactly as I remembered, about 12 feet square, built from weathered stone with a slate roof mostly covered in moss. The wooden door was secured with a padlock so old and rusty it looked like it might crumble if I touched it. I pulled out the brass key Harold had given me. It didn't fit the padlock, of course not. That would be too easy. I was about to head back to the house when I noticed something carved into the stone above the door. Lichen and ivy had obscured it, but in the fading light I could just make out words. What flows beneath sustains what grows, a BOVEA gardening motto, some kind of Victorian-era water management philosophy. I took out my phone and snapped a picture, then noticed the time. 8:47 p.m. I'd been out here longer than I thought. Back inside, I made instant coffee and opened Grandpa Ted's journal to the second entry, March 30, 1897. The sound is growing louder. Sam warned me this would happen as he got weaker. It knows, he said. It knows I'm dying and it's afraid. I asked him what it was afraid of. He just looked at me with those hollow eyes and said that whoever comes next won't understand, won't protect it. I am beginning to understand the weight of what I've promised. This is not merely land. It is a covenant, a guardianship. The pump house is not a structure, it is a seal. God help me, I have agreed to become its keeper. A seal? A seal for what? I flipped forward, skimming entries. The journals spanned decades, passed from one Hawthorne to the next. Each generation added their own observations, their own experiences. But one theme remained constant: the pump house must never be removed. My grandfather's first entry was dated June 3, 1964. Father is gone. The responsibility is mine now. 40 years he kept this secret. 40 years of telling curious neighbors it was just an old well house, nothing interesting. 40 years of refusing every developer's offer, every friend's suggestion to tear it down. I understand now. I've been down there. I've seen what father protected, what his father protected before him. It's beautiful. It's terrifying. And it's absolutely real. Margaret Thornwood came by today. She's the new realtor in town, young and ambitious, wanted to know if I'd ever consider selling. I told her the same thing I'll tell everyone. This land isn't for sale. Not now. Not ever. She didn't like that answer. A knock at the door made me jump, spilling coffee across the journal's pages. I grabbed a kitchen towel, dabbing frantically at the spreading stain, and went to the door. Margaret Thornwood stood on my porch with a man in an expensive suit and a camera crew. "Mr. Hawthorne." Her smile was bright, predatory. "I hope you don't mind. This is Trent Harrison from Channel 7 News. They're doing a segment on the Riverside Pines Community Beautification Project, and I thought it would be wonderful to include your property's transformation." Trent stepped forward, hand extended. "Mr. Hawthorne, we're highlighting how the HOA has helped improve property values and community standards. Margaret mentioned your property has some exciting renovation plans." "I never said. We'd love to get some B-roll of the property," Margaret interrupted smoothly. "Especially that charming pump house, such a unique historical feature. I'm sure our viewers would love to see it." I kept my hand on the door, blocking their entry. "I haven't agreed to any interviews or renovations." Margaret's smile tightened. Of course. We're just documenting the current state of neighborhood properties. Public interest, you understand. The street view is public access, naturally, but we thought you might want to provide your own perspective. Otherwise, we'll just have to work with what we can see from the outside." "Which is perfectly legal," Trent added helpfully, gesturing to his cameraman who was already filming the house's exterior. I stepped onto the porch, forcing them back. "Turn off the camera. Freedom of the press, Mr. Hawthorne," Trent said, but he had the decency to look uncomfortable. "We're on public property." "Actually," a new voice called out, "you're not." A woman in paint-stained overalls was walking up my driveway, carrying a plate covered in aluminum foil. She was maybe 40, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a messy bun and dirt under her fingernails. "Hey, James," she said, as if we'd known each other for years. "I'm Ruby Chen. 2 doors down, brought you some cookies." She thrust the plate at me, then turned to Margaret and the news crew. "And just FYI, the property line actually extends 10 feet past the driveway entrance, so you're all currently trespassing. James here would be well within his rights to call the sheriff." Margaret's face flushed. "Ruby, this is official HOA business, and bringing a news crew to a resident's home without their consent is harassment." Ruby crossed her arms. "Want me to call Sheriff Morrison?" "Pretty sure he'd love to know the HOA president is conducting ambush interviews at 9 p.m. Trent cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should reschedule." "No need," I said. "I won't be doing any interviews, and my property isn't part of any beautification project." Margaret opened her mouth, then closed it. Her expression was pure ice. "Mr. Hawthorne, you're making this much harder than it needs to be. The HOA is trying to help you by showing up with cameras and making statements I never authorized." I shook my head. "I think we're done here." "The violation notices stand," Margaret snapped. 30 days, Mr. Hawthorne. If that pump house isn't removed, the fines begin, $500 per day." She stalked off, Trent and his crew scrambling after her. I watched them go, my heart pounding. "She's bluffing," Ruby said quietly. "About the fines, probably." "Probably." Margaret's good at finding loopholes. Ruby nodded toward the house. "Can we talk inside? There's stuff you need to know about your grandfather and the HOA." Over coffee and surprisingly good chocolate chip cookies, Ruby laid it out. Margaret bought her house 6 years ago. Within a month, she'd organized an HOA. Within 6 months, she was president. Within a year, she'd quadrupled the fees and started enforcing standards that basically amounted to making every house look like a Pottery Barn catalog. Didn't people fight back? Some did. Most of them sold and moved away. Margaret made their lives hell, constant violation notices, fines, legal threats. She's got a brother who's a real estate developer. Every time someone sells, he swoops in, flips the property, and sells it at a massive markup to wealthy buyers who love the HOA aesthetic. My grandfather, Ruby smiled sadly. Ted was the only one she couldn't break. He knew the law had documentation going back over a century proving his property rights superseded any HOA claims. Every time Margaret tried to find him, he'd take her to court and win. It drove her crazy. What changed? Ted got sick. Dementia, right. At my nod, Ruby continued. About 2 years ago, Margaret tried to have him declared incompetent. Said he wasn't maintaining his property, wasn't fit to make decisions. She almost succeeded. Would have, except your mom hired a lawyer who proved Ted was still legally competent, just needed some help. Remembered those phone calls. Mom, stressed and angry, telling me Grandpa was in trouble but refusing to explain. I'd been wrapped up in my own problems, a failing relationship, a job I hated, debt I couldn't escape. I told her I couldn't deal with family drama. I hadn't even come to visit. Hey, Ruby said gently. Ted understood. He told me once that he was glad you weren't here, said Margaret would have tried to use you against him. What does she want with this property? Same thing she wants with all of them. Control, development, money. Ruby leaned back. But with your land. I think it's personal now. Ted humiliated her in court twice, made her look foolish in front of the whole town. Margaret doesn't forget things like that. Mentioned the pump house specifically. Yeah, she's been obsessed with that thing for years. Kept saying it was an eyesore, a safety hazard, a liability. Ted always refused to even discuss removing it. Ruby studied me. What's the story with that old building anyway? Ted was always really protective of it. I thought about the journal, the letter, the brass key that didn't fit any lock I could find. Family history, I said. My great-great-grandfather built it. Ruby looked like she wanted to ask more, but just nodded. Well, whatever it is, Margaret wants it gone, and what Margaret wants, she usually gets. So watch yourself, okay? She plays dirty. After Ruby left, I went back to the journal, reading by lamplight until my eyes burned. October 12, 1978, the developers came again today. Offered me $2 million for the property. $2 million, I laughed in their faces. They looked at me like I was insane. Maybe I am. How do you explain to someone that there are things worth more than money? Things that, if lost, could never be replaced. I went down to check on it tonight. Still there, still beautiful, still humming its ancient song. It knows I'm protecting it. Sometimes I think it protects me too. Margaret Thornwood was with the developers. She's moved from real estate into development herself. Smart woman, dangerous woman. She looked at the pump house with such hatred in her eyes, like it personally offended her. What's inside? She asked me. Nothing that concerns you, I told her. Everything in this town concerns me now, she said. God help me, I believe she meant it. The next morning, I found a citation taped to my door. Official HOA stationery signed by Margaret Thornwood. Notice of violation, failure to maintain lawn to community standards. Fine, $200 due within 15 days. I looked at my lawn. It needed mowing, sure, but it wasn't even that bad. I pulled out my phone and took pictures, then noticed identical notices on 2 other doors down the street. Both houses that looked perfectly maintained. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mr. Hawthorne. This is Derek Hoffman from Hoffman & Associates Real Estate. I have a client very interested in your property. They're prepared to make a substantial offer. Not interested. Sir, if you just hear the number. Not interested. I hung up. The phone immediately rang again. Different number. James Hawthorne, Lisa Berkowitz with Premier Properties. I understand you've recently inherited. I turned off my phone. Over the next week, I received 17 more calls, 9 more violation notices, and 3 formal letters from the HOA threatening legal action. The fines now totaled $2,400, also spent every night reading the journal. The entries painted a picture of generations of Hawthorns protecting something precious. Something that required the pump house to remain exactly where it was. But none of them ever said explicitly what it was. Just cryptic references to it and the gift and the covenant. Then, buried in a section from 1945, I found it. My son asked me today what makes our land special. He's 12 now, old enough to start understanding. I took him down to the pump house, unlocked the door, not the padlock, the real lock, and showed him the stairs. Where do they go? He asked. Down, I told him. And then across, and then to something remarkable. We go down. Not yet, I said. You're not ready, but one day you will be, and you'll understand why we protect this place, why we can never let anyone destroy the pump house. Because it's a seal, he said, smart boy. Yes, a seal. What's it sealing? I showed him. God forgive me, I showed him. He cried, then he laughed, then he cried again. We can never tell anyone, he asked. Never, I said. He kept the secret for 60 years. I pray my grandson will be as strong. Stairs. There were stairs under the pump house. I grabbed a flashlight and headed outside. It was past midnight, the moon a thin crescent behind racing clouds. The pump house loomed in the darkness, its stone walls silvered with age. The padlock hung heavy and old on the wooden door. I examined it closer this time, running my fingers around the frame, checking for any other opening. Nothing. Then I noticed the stone. One of the foundation stones on the eastern wall sat slightly proud of the others. I pressed it. It moved inward with a grinding sound, and I heard a click. The door swung open. Inside, the pump house was empty except for an old hand pump in the center and a wooden floor covered in decades of dust and dead leaves. I swept the flashlight around, looking for... What? A trapdoor? A hidden panel? The pump. Of course, I grabbed the handle and pulled. It resisted, rusted solid. I put my weight into it, and with a shriek of metal on metal, it moved. Once, twice, 3 times, the floor shuddered. Then, with a sound like a sigh, a section of boards near the western wall lifted an inch. I knelt and worked my fingers under the edge. The entire section, about 3 feet square, lifted up, revealing rough-cut stone stairs descending into darkness. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I turned it back on to use the flashlight app. A text from an unknown number. "I know what you're doing. Stop now." Another buzz. A phone. Me standing outside the pump house, taken from somewhere in the surrounding trees. Another text. "Walk away, Mr. Hawthorne, while you still can." I looked at the stairs, at my phone, at the darkness between them. Then I started down. The stairs were narrow, carved from living rock, descending at a steep angle. 20 steps, 30, 40. The air grew cool and damp, smelling of stone and earth and something else, something alive. At 60 steps, the stairs leveled out into a tunnel, hand-carved, about 6 feet high and 4 feet wide, stretching forward into darkness. The walls were smooth, almost polished, and carved with symbols I didn't recognize. I followed the tunnel. 50 feet, 100, 200. It curved gently to the right, always descending slightly. The humming I'd heard, or thought I'd heard, grew louder. Then the tunnel opened up. I stood at the edge of an underground chamber so vast my flashlight couldn't find the far wall. The ceiling soared 30 feet overhead, natural stone columns supporting it like the nave of a cathedral. And in the center, I stopped breathing. In the center of the chamber was a pool. But the water didn't look like any water I'd ever seen. It glowed. Soft blue-green light pulsed from its depths, illuminating the entire cavern with bioluminescent beauty. And growing from the pool, their roots disappearing into the glowing water, were trees, not saplings, full-grown trees, oak, maple, birch, others I didn't recognize. Their trunks were pale, almost white, and their leaves shimmered with the same blue-green light as the water. The humming came from them, or through them, a resonance that I felt in my bones. I walked closer, mesmerized. The pool was perhaps 50 feet across, perfectly circular, the water so clear I could see straight to the bottom. And there, maybe 20 feet down, something moved. Shapes, shadows, things that might have been fish or might have been something else entirely. On the far side of the pool, carved into the stone wall, was an inscription. "Here flows the heart of the land. What is taken must be given. What is given must be kept. Break the seal, break the covenant. Break the covenant, break the land." I pulled out my phone to take pictures, but it was dead. Completely drained, even though it had been at 87% when I came down. A sound behind me. Footsteps on stone. I spun around, flashlight raised. Margaret Thornwood stood at the tunnel entrance. She wasn't alone. 2 men flanked her, both carrying professional camera equipment. And behind them, at least a dozen more people. "Well," Margaret said, her voice echoing in the chamber. "I knew if I pushed hard enough, you'd lead me here eventually." She stepped forward, her eyes on the glowing pool. "My God, it's real. It's actually real." "You need to leave," I said. "All of you, this place is what, Mr. Hawthorne? Sacred, protected, private." She laughed. "This is the discovery of the century. Do you have any idea what's down here? This is a complete underground ecosystem, previously unknown species, a natural light source that could revolutionize energy production. This pool alone is worth billions. This isn't yours to take. It isn't yours to hide." She gestured to the cameramen. "Document everything. I want samples of the water, the plant life, everything." "Stop." I moved between them and the pool. "You don't understand. This place is balanced. It's a system. If you disturb it." "What, it'll get angry?" Margaret's smile was vicious. "Your grandfather filled your head with superstitious nonsense. This is a geological formation. Remarkable, yes. But not magic, not sacred, just science we don't understand yet." One of the men moved toward the pool with a collection kit. The humming changed, deepened. The light pulsed faster, and the water began to rise. It didn't splash or overflow. It simply rose, defying gravity, forming a column in the center of the pool. 10 feet, 15, 20. The column twisted, taking shape. Limbs ahead, eyes that glowed with ancient intelligence. Everyone froze. The water thing spoke. Its voice was the sound of waves on stone, of rain on leaves, of rivers cutting through mountains over millennia. "Break the covenant," it said. "Break the land." Then it collapsed back into the pool with a splash that sent phosphorescent water across the chamber floor. Where the water landed, the stone began to crack. Margaret stared, her face white. Then she turned and ran. Her entire crew ran with her, equipment abandoned, footsteps echoing down the tunnel. I stood alone in the chamber, watching the cracks spread across the floor, watching the trees' light pulse erratically, watching the pool's surface roil and churn. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't know, I didn't understand." Humming slowed, steadied. The cracks stopped spreading in the pool's depth. Shapes moved, not threatening, almost curious. I backed away slowly, respectfully, and climbed the stairs back to the pump house. The sky was beginning to lighten. I'd been down there for hours. I closed the trapdoor, worked the pump handle in reverse, and watched the board settle back into place. Then I stepped outside and locked the door, the stone mechanism sliding home with a solid click. My phone had somehow recharged. 37 missed calls, 62 texts, most from unknown numbers but several from a name I recognized. Sheriff Morrison, Mr. Hawthorne, I need you to call me immediately. Margaret Thornwood has filed a complaint, I called. James Hawthorne. The sheriff's voice was gruff but not unfriendly. Need you to come down to the station. Margaret Thornwood claims you threatened her on your property last night. Was trespassing with at least a dozen people. That's what I figured. Still need to take a statement. Can you be here in an hour? I'll be there in 30 minutes. I was halfway to my truck when I noticed it. The pump house looked different, smaller somehow. I walked back, studying it. The ivy had grown. In one night, it had spread across the entire western wall, thick and lush, completely covering the stone. Flowers bloomed in the growth, pale blue-green flowers that hadn't been there before, the same color as the light in the pool. Part 2. The pressure Sheriff Morrison's office smelled like coffee and old leather. The man himself was in his 60s, weathered and practical, with the kind of face that had seen too much to be easily impressed. So, he said, pouring me a cup of coffee without asking if I wanted one, Margaret Thornwood says you lured her onto your property under false pretenses, then threatened her when she tried to leave. Says you've got some kind of illegal structure on your land that poses a public safety risk. That's not what happened. Figure it was. He settled into his chair with a sigh. Known Margaret for 6 years now. Woman's got a gift for bending the truth until it screams, but she's also got lawyers. Expensive ones, so I need your version on the record. I told him. Not everything, not about the pool or the water thing or the glowing trees, but about Margaret showing up at midnight with a crew of people, about them entering my property without permission, about her trying to document areas of my home I'd specifically told her were off limits. She say why she was so interested in your pump house. She thinks it's an eyesore, wants me to tear it down. Morrison studied me over his coffee cup. Your grandfather and I were friends, not close, but we played chess sometimes at the library. He ever tell you about the time Margaret tried to have him arrested? No, 3 years back. Claimed Ted was running some kind of illegal operation on his property. Said there were strange lights, unusual activity, people coming and going at odd hours. Morrison smiled. Wasn't a word of truth to it. I went out there myself, looked around, saw an old man tending his garden and reading his books. But Margaret pushed it. Filed complaint after complaint until I had to tell her officially, unless she had actual evidence of a crime, she needed to leave Ted alone. What did she do? Switched tactics. Started with the HOA stuff instead. Violation notices, fines, legal pressure. Ted fought her every step, but it wore on him, especially after he got sick. Morrison set down his cup. I'm telling you this so you understand, Margaret Thornwood doesn't give up. She's decided she wants something from you, and she'll use every tool she's got to get it. The pump house, or the land it's on, or both. He pulled out a folder. I did some digging after Ted passed. Your property is the last undeveloped parcel in Riverside Pines. Every other lot has been bought up by developers or wealthy buyers. Your 5 acres, prime real estate, worth millions if it's subdivided and built on. Not selling. But you need to know what you're up against. He slid the folder across the desk. Margaret's brother, Richard Thornwood, owns Thornwood Development Corporation. In the last 5 years, they've bought 18 properties in Riverside Pines, demolished the existing homes, and built luxury houses that sell for $3 to $5 million each. Margaret uses the HOA to make life hell for existing residents until they sell. Richard swoops in with below-market offers. They flip the properties and split the profit. That can't be legal. It's not illegal. Just deeply unethical. Morrison leaned back. Here's my advice, Mr. Hawthorne. Document everything. Every interaction with Margaret, every violation notice, every phone call. Get cameras on your property. And for God's sake, get yourself a lawyer. Because Margaret's coming for you and she's not going to stop until she gets what she wants or you make her. I left the sheriff's office with the folder and a growing sense of dread. My phone rang before I even reached my truck. Mr. Hawthorne. This is Diane Foster from the Riverside Pines Building Department. We've received a complaint about an unpermitted structure on your property. I need to schedule an inspection. Structure? The complaint lists a stone outbuilding described as a pump house. According to our records, there's no building permit on file for this structure. It was built in 1897. I understand, but current regulations don't apply to structures built before 1950. I checked. I'd spent 3 hours last night researching Oregon property law. Grandfathered structures are exempt from modern building codes unless they're substantially renovated or pose an immediate safety hazard. A pause. Who told you that? It's public record. Oregon Revised Statutes, Chapter 455. Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Hawthorne, I'm still going to need to conduct an inspection to verify the structure's safety. Fine, schedule it through my lawyer. I gave her Harold Whitmore's number and hung up. 3 more calls came in before I made it home. A reporter from the Riverside Pines Gazette, another real estate agent, and finally Margaret herself. Mr. Hawthorne, I think we got off on the wrong foot. You trespassed on my property with a dozen people in the middle of the night. I was concerned about the structural integrity of your pump house. As HOA president, I have a responsibility to ensure all properties meet safety standards. At midnight, with camera crews, her voice hardened. I'm trying to be reasonable here. I'm willing to forget about last night's incident if you agree to have the pump house professionally assessed. At my expense, if it's safe, I'll drop the violation notice. If it's not, we'll work together on a solution. Mr. Hawthorne, the pump house stays. No inspections, no assessments, no solutions. It's been standing for 127 years. It'll stand for 127 more. Being unreasonable. You're being intrusive. We're done here, Mrs. Thornwood. I hung up and immediately called Harold Whitmore. James, I was about to call you. I've received 3 demands from the HOA in the last hour. They're threatening to place a lien on your property for unpaid fines. Can they do that? They can try. It won't hold up in court. The fines are illegitimate, but it'll tie up your property for months. You won't be able to sell or refinance while the lien is in place. Not planning to sell. That's not the point. Margaret knows that. She's trying to make your life difficult enough that you change your mind. Papers rustled in the background. I'm filing a motion to dismiss all HOA claims against your property. In the meantime, I need you to do something for me. What? Find out what's under that pump house. My heart stopped. What? Your grandfather's journal. I know he left it to you. I know it contains information about the property. Harold's voice was carefully neutral. I'm your lawyer, James. I can't help you if I don't know what we're protecting. It's complicated. Sure it is. Ted spent 40 years keeping it secret. But Margaret's not going to stop. She's obsessed with that pump house, and I need to know why before I can properly defend against her. I thought about the pool, the trees, the thing made of water that had spoken in a voice like ancient rivers. If I tell you, you have to promise me something. What? You can never tell anyone else, no matter what. A long pause. James, as your attorney, I'm bound by confidentiality. Anything you tell me is privileged. I need more than privilege. I need your word. Your actual personal word that this stays between us. Another pause. You have it. Now tell me what's down there. I told him everything, the stairs, the tunnel, the cavern, the pool, the glowing water and the trees and the shapes moving in the depths, the water thing that rose up when Margaret's crew approached, the warning carved into the stone. When I finished, there was silence on the line for a long time. Harold, I'm here, just processing. A sound that might have been a laugh. Your grandfather told me once that some things couldn't be explained, only experienced. I thought he was being poetic. You believe me? Ted spent 60 years protecting that property. He turned down millions of dollars, fought the HOA, risked his reputation and his freedom. Men don't do that for nothing. Another pause. I believe you saw something down there, something worth protecting. That's enough for me. What do? We make it legally impossible for Margaret to touch that pump house. I'll file for historical landmark status. Get the property listed on the National Register. That'll add layers of protection even the HOA can't penetrate. How long will that take? Months, maybe longer. Harold's voice turned grim. Which means we need to hold Margaret off until then, and based on what you've told me, I don't think she's going to wait months. He was right. Over the next week, things escalated. Monday, a building inspector showed up unannounced, claiming he'd received an anonymous tip about unsafe structures. I refused entry without a warrant. He left, promising to return with one. Tuesday, my water was shut off. The city claimed there was a problem with my meter. It took 3 calls to 3 different departments before someone admitted that Margaret Thornwood had filed a complaint about unauthorized water usage. The water came back on 6 hours later with no explanation. Wednesday, someone drove through my front lawn at 3 a.m., tearing up 50 feet of grass and flower beds. No witnesses. Sheriff Morrison took a report but didn't sound optimistic about finding the culprit. Thursday, I received a notice from the county health department about standing water on the property posing a mosquito breeding risk. They were referring to a decorative fountain in the garden that had been there since 1910. I was given 48 hours to remove it or face fines. Friday, my truck's tires were slashed while I was inside the grocery store. All 4. Security cameras malfunctioned during the incident. Saturday, Ruby Chen knocked on my door at 7 a.m. looking worried. You need to see this. She led me down the street to where a crowd had gathered. Someone had put up signs, professional printed signs on metal stakes, dotting the lawns every 50 feet, coming soon. THORNWOODESDATES. Luxury homes SDRTING at $4.2 million. Final phase of Riverside development, and beneath that, in smaller text, pending acquisition of remaining parcels. That's your property, Ruby said quietly. She's already marketing it, already got buyers lined up. She's that confident she's going to get it. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of every sign. Then I called Harold. That's fraud, he said immediately. She's advertising property she doesn't own and has no legal right to acquire. I'll file a cease and desist today. It won't matter. She doesn't care about legal. She cares about pressure. Then we apply pressure back. I'll contact the Real Estate Commission, the State Attorney General's office, and every media outlet in Oregon. Margaret wants a fight. We'll give her one she can't win quietly. Sunday, the news crews arrived, not local news. National news, CNN, Fox, NBC, all running variations of the same story. Local homeowner defies HOA, blocks major development project. They camped out on the public street in front of my house, interviewing neighbors, filming the property, turning my life into a spectacle. Margaret was in her element. She did interview after interview, positioned perfectly to look reasonable and concerned. "We're simply trying to improve the community," she told one reporter. "Mr. Hawthorne's property has become a blight. We've tried to work with him, offered assistance, but he refuses to cooperate. Meanwhile, the entire neighborhood suffers." Reporter, a young woman with sharp eyes and an expensive suit, nodded sympathetically. "And what about the pump house? We've heard that's a particular point of contention. It's a safety hazard, a derelict structure that should have been demolished years ago. We've offered to pay for its removal, but Mr. Hawthorne won't even allow inspectors on the property." Margaret's expression was perfect, concerned citizen trying her best. "We're worried about liability. What if it collapses? What if children get hurt? What if you're lying?" The voice came from behind the camera. Ruby Chen stepped into frame, her paint-stained overalls a stark contrast to Margaret's designer outfit. "Excuse me?" Margaret's smile went rigid. "Lying. That pump house has been standing for over a century. It's not a safety hazard. You just want it gone because it's in the way of your development plans." Ruby looked directly at the camera. "Margaret Thornwood has been systematically forcing long-term residents out of Riverside Pines so her brother's company can build luxury homes. She uses the HOA as a weapon. Endless violation notices, harassment, legal threats. She drove out the Hendersons, the Yamamotos, the Kowalskis, good people who'd lived here for decades, and now she's targeting James Hawthorne because his property is the last piece she needs. That's defamatory," Margaret snapped. "I could sue you." "Please do. I'd love to testify under oath about every illegal thing you've done as HOA president." Ruby smiled sweetly. "I've been keeping records." Reporters' eyes lit up. This was better television than she'd hoped for. "Records? What kind of records?" "Not now," I said, stepping between them. To the reporter, "If you want the real story, talk to Sheriff Morrison, talk to the families who have been forced out, talk to Harold Whitmore, my lawyer. Get the whole picture before you decide who's telling the truth." Reporter studied me. "Mr. Hawthorne, why is this pump house so important to you?" "Because beneath it lies something ancient and precious. Because my family has protected it for 5 generations. Because if it's destroyed, something irreplaceable will be lost. It's my property," I said instead, "and I have every legal right to keep it." That night, my face was on the news. HOA battle turns nasty in Oregon town. They showed the pump house, my family's legacy, and debated whether I was a hero standing up to bureaucratic overreach or a stubborn crank blocking progress. I turned off the TV and went outside. The pump house sat in the moonlight, covered now in thick ivy and those strange blue-green flowers. They glowed faintly in the darkness, just bright enough to see. I hadn't told anyone about the flowers. Hadn't mentioned how the ivy had grown 5 months' worth in a single night. The land was protecting itself, defending its secret, but for how long? I unlocked the pump house and descended the stairs. The tunnel seemed warmer than before, the symbols on the walls pulsing with faint light. In the cavern, the pool's bioluminescence had intensified. The trees' leaves shimmered like stars, and in the water, the shapes were more defined. I could see them clearly now, not fish, something else. Something that might have been human once, or might become human eventually, or might be something entirely other. One of them surfaced. A woman, or the memory of one, her features fluid and ever-shifting. Her eyes were the color of deep ocean. "Keeper," she said, her voice the whisper of water over stone. "I don't know what that means. You stand between us and harm. You protect the covenant." She tilted her head, water flowing from her hair like liquid light. "As your blood has done for 5 generations. What are you?" "What we have always been, what we will always be, the heart of this land, the water that feeds the roots that hold the earth." Her form rippled. "Break the seal, break the covenant, break the covenant, break the land." Margaret Thornwood wants to destroy the pump house. No, we feel her intent like poison in the soil. You stop her. The water woman's laugh was like rain. "We are not warriors, keeper, we are guardians. We hold, we nurture, we sustain." But we cannot act against those who would destroy us. That is why we need you. Trying, but she's powerful. She has money, lawyers, influence, and you have us. The woman reached out, her hand breaking the surface. Touch the water, keeper. Know what you protect. I knelt at the pool's edge and dipped my fingers in. The water was warm, alive, humming with energy that traveled up my arm and through my body. I saw centuries of roots drinking deep, trees growing strong, soil rich with life. The underground river that fed the pool, flowing from somewhere deep in the earth, ancient beyond measure. The covenant made in blood and promise, Hawthorne blood binding Hawthorne promises. What would happen if the seal was broken, if the pump house was destroyed, if the pool was exposed? The vision hit me like a hammer. The pool drained, the trees withered, the land above cracking, dying, turning to dust. The blight spreading outward from this point, killing everything it touched. Miles of forest, decades of growth, centuries of life gone. I jerked my hand back, gasping. You see, the water woman said softly. We are not just this pool, this cavern, we are the land itself, the water table that feeds every well, every stream, every tree for miles. Break us and you break all of it. Margaret doesn't know. She thinks you're just an unusual geological formation. Then make her understand. She won't listen to me. Then make her see. The woman began to sink back into the pool. The covenant must hold, keeper, whatever the cost. I climbed back up to the surface and locked the pump house behind me. The flowers glowed brighter now, and I realized they formed a pattern, a spiral that covered the entire western wall, marking the structure as something other than ordinary stone and wood. Tomorrow, I'd have to face Margaret again. Tomorrow, I'd have to find a way to protect this place without revealing what lay beneath. Tomorrow, the pressure would intensify. But tonight, I sat in my grandfather's study and read more of his journal. July 8, 1989, the dreams are getting worse. I see the pool drained, the trees dying, the land cracking open. I wake up gasping, knowing that somewhere in the future, someone will try to break the covenant. Someone will succeed or come close to succeeding. I'm doing everything I can to prevent it. Legal protections, documentation. This journal passed down so that future keepers will know what they're protecting, but I'm afraid it won't be enough. Margaret Thornwood came by again today. She's relentless. Just name your price, Ted, she said. Everyone has a price. Me, I told her. Then you're a fool, she said. Maybe I am, but I'm a fool who knows what matters. And this place, this covenant, this promise matters more than money, more than comfort, more than my own life. I only hope Jamie understands that when his turn comes. I closed the journal, my grandfather's words echoing in my mind. When his turn comes, my turn was now. And I was starting to understand the weight of what he'd carried all those years. The next morning, I found Margaret Thornwood in my driveway. She wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit stood beside her, flanked by two others with briefcases. Behind them, a moving truck was parked on the street. Mr. Hawthorne, Margaret said briskly. This is Richard Thornwood, my brother and CEO of Thornwood Development Corporation. He'd like to make you an offer. Richard stepped forward, hand extended. I didn't take it. Mr. Hawthorne, let's be frank, you're in over your head here. HOA battles are expensive. Legal fees, fines, property liens, it adds up fast. I'm prepared to offer you $4 million for this property. Cash. You walk away with enough money to start fresh anywhere you want. No. You didn't even let me finish. No. Richard's friendly expression cracked. You're making a mistake. This development is happening with or without your cooperation. If you sell now, you get market value. If you force us to acquire the property through legal means, you'll get much less. Possibly nothing once all the fees and fines are deducted. You can't acquire property through legal means unless I agree to sell, which I don't. There are other ways, Margaret said quietly. Eminent domain. Public safety condemnation. Tax liens. We have options, Mr. Hawthorne. Then use them. Take me to court. Let's see how well your options hold up in front of a judge. Richard's jaw tightened. You're making enemies you can't afford. No, you're making enemies with someone who isn't intimidated by money or threats. I looked at the moving truck. What's that for? That, Margaret said with a smile, is for the pump house. Since you won't cooperate voluntarily, we've obtained an emergency demolition order. The structure has been deemed unsafe by the county building department. It's being removed today. My blood went cold. You can't. We can, and we are. She pulled out a document. Emergency order signed by County Commissioner Wells. The pump house poses an immediate safety risk and must be demolished within 24 hours. Since you're refusing to comply, the county will do it for you and bill you for the cost. I grabbed my phone and called Harold. He answered on the first ring. James, I know. I'm already filing an emergency injunction, but the earliest I can get a hearing is tomorrow morning. They're here now. They've got a demolition crew. Stall them. I'm calling the sheriff. Don't let them touch that structure until you hear from me. I hung up and stepped between Margaret and the pump house. You're not touching it, not today, not ever. You can't stop us. We have a legal order. I have legal representation filing an emergency injunction as we speak. You proceed with demolition before that hearing, you'll be in contempt of court. Richard pulled out his phone. "I'll call Commissioner Wells. We'll sort this out right now." "You do that. Meanwhile, I'm calling every news outlet in Oregon and telling them you're about to demolish a 127-year-old historical structure without proper environmental review or heritage assessment." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." Me. A long moment we stood there, me blocking the path to the pump house. Margaret and Richard calculating whether I was serious. The decision was made for us. Sheriff Morrison's patrol car pulled up, lights flashing. He climbed out slowly, assessed the situation, and walked over. "Morning, folks. I hear there's some confusion about a demolition order." "No confusion," Margaret said. "We have a legal right." "I've seen the order," Morrison interrupted. "And I've also seen the injunction being filed right now by Mr. Hawthorne's attorney. Until a judge rules on that injunction, nobody's demolishing anything." "Sheriff, you don't have the authority." "Actually, I do. This is a civil dispute now, and until the courts settle it, I'm declaring this property off-limits to all unauthorized personnel." He looked at Richard. "That includes you and your crew." "This is obstruction," Richard snapped. "No, this is following the law. You want to demolish that structure. Fine. Get a court order that supersedes the injunction. Until then, everyone needs to leave Mr. Hawthorne's property." Margaret's face was red. "This isn't over." "Never thought it was," Morrison said evenly. They left. The moving truck pulled away, but I knew Margaret was right. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Part 3. The BREAKING point. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. I met Harold outside the county courthouse at 8:30, both of us carrying boxes of documentation. "Got precedent cases going back 50 years, Harold said. "Historical structure protections, property rights, examples of HOA overreach. We've got a strong case." "Who's the judge?" "Patricia Volkov. She's fair, but she doesn't like wasting time. We need to be concise and convincing." Inside, the courtroom was already filling. Margaret and Richard sat at the plaintiff's table with 3 lawyers. In the gallery behind them, I recognized several faces. Other HOA board members, real estate agents, and Commissioner Wells, the man who'd signed the demolition order. The bailiff called us to order. Judge Volkov entered, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Let's keep this simple," she said, settling into her chair. "Mrs. Thornwood, you're seeking to enforce an emergency demolition order. Mr. Hawthorne, you're requesting an injunction to block that demolition. Mrs. Thornwood, you have 10 minutes to state your case." Margaret's lead attorney stood. His name was Bradley Sinclair, and he had the kind of polished confidence that came from winning most of his cases. "Your Honor, the structure in question is a derelict outbuilding that poses significant safety risks to the surrounding community. County building inspectors have determined that the foundation is compromised, the roof is near collapse, and the entire structure could fail at any moment, potentially causing injury or death. Has Mr. Hawthorne been given opportunity to repair the structure?" Judge Volkov asked. "He's refused all inspection requests, Your Honor. We've made multiple attempts to assess the structure's condition, but Mr. Hawthorne has denied access." "Because the access requests weren't legitimate," Harold interjected. "They were fishing expeditions designed to find violations where none exist." "Mr. Whitmore, you'll have your turn," Volkov said. "Continue, Mr. Sinclair." "The HOA has documentation of Mr. Hawthorne's property violations going back several months. Overgrown vegetation, peeling paint, and most critically, this unsafe structure. The emergency order was issued because Mr. Hawthorne's refusal to cooperate left the county no choice. Public safety must take precedence over individual property rights." Sinclair presented photos of the pump house, highlighting cracks in the mortar, loose stones, and areas where the roof sagged. Some of the photos I recognized. Others looked unfamiliar had they been doctored, enhanced to make the structure look worse. "The county has offered to perform the demolition at no cost to Mr. Hawthorne," Sinclair continued. "We're trying to help him while protecting the community. His obstruction serves no purpose except to delay inevitable safety measures." Judge Volkov studied the photos. "Mr. Whitmore, your response." Harold stood, carrying himself with quiet authority. "Your Honor, this isn't about safety. It's about real estate development and a systematic campaign to force Mr. Hawthorne off his property." He laid out the timeline. Margaret's repeated attempts to buy the land, the escalating HOA violations, the harassment. The tires slashed, water shut off, property damaged. The premature announcement of Thornwood Estates development before my property was even acquired. "Pump house," Harold said, "has stood for 127 years. It survived earthquakes, floods, and harsh winters. Suddenly, after 5 generations of Hawthorne's maintaining it, it's a safety hazard. The timing is suspicious, Your Honor, very suspicious." He presented our documentation. Historical photos showing the pump house unchanged over decades. Letters from structural engineers I'd hired in the last week, all stating the building was sound. Property records proving the Hawthorne family's continuous ownership and maintenance. This structure is eligible for historical landmark status, Harold continued. We've begun that application process. Demolishing it before that determination is made would be destroying potentially irreplaceable historical property. Sinclair. Volkov looked at the other attorney. Do you have actual evidence of structural failure, engineering reports, professional assessments? The county inspector's report, Your Honor. Read it. It says the structure appears old and potentially unstable. That's an opinion, not a professional engineering assessment. Do you have anything more concrete? Sinclair hesitated. The inspector was denied full access to perform a complete assessment. Mr. Hawthorne has Fourth Amendment rights, Harold said. The county can't force entry onto private property without clear evidence of immediate danger. Appears old doesn't meet that standard. Judge Volkov leaned back. I'm inclined to agree. Mrs. Thornwood, has anyone actually been injured by this structure? Margaret stood. Not yet, Your Honor, but not yet isn't a legal standard for emergency demolition. Volkov looked at the photos again. I see an old building that needs maintenance. I don't see an imminent threat to public safety. Honor, Sinclair interjected, we have testimony from neighbors about strange occurrences on the property, unusual lights at night, sounds coming from underground, activities that suggest Mr. Hawthorne may be conducting illegal operations. Objection. Harold was on his feet. That's wild speculation with no factual basis. It's testimony from concerned citizens, Sinclair shot back. It's a fishing expedition, Harold said firmly. And it's exactly what I'm talking about. The HOA is throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks, hoping something will give them access to Mr. Hawthorne's property. Judge Volkov held up a hand. Enough! Mr. Sinclair, unless you have concrete evidence of illegal activity, that line of argument is going nowhere. We're requesting permission to conduct a full inspection, Sinclair said, with county officials and structural engineers present. If the structure is as safe as Mr. Hawthorne claims, he should have no objection to proving it. It was a trap. If I refused, I looked like I was hiding something. If I agreed, they'd find a way to access the pump house interior and potentially discover the stairs. Harold must have sensed my panic because he jumped in immediately. Mr. Hawthorne is willing to have the exterior inspected by a mutually agreed-upon structural engineer. But the interior is private property, and absent a warrant or emergency circumstances, he has every right to deny access. Interior is where the real dangers likely exist, Sinclair argued. Then get a warrant, Harold said. Convince a judge that there's probable cause for a search. That's how our legal system works. Volkov tapped her fingers on the bench. Here's my ruling. The emergency demolition order is stayed pending further review. Mr. Hawthorne, you will allow an exterior inspection by a licensed structural engineer, one selected jointly by both parties. That inspection will occur within 2 weeks. Honor, Sinclair started. Not finished. The engineer will assess the structure's exterior condition and provide a written report. If that report finds evidence of imminent structural failure, we'll revisit the demolition order. If it finds the structure is sound, the demolition order is dismissed permanently. We clear? Yes, Your Honor, Harold said. Sinclair looked like he wanted to argue but finally nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Good, this court is adjourned. In the hallway, Harold gripped my shoulder. That was close, but we bought ourselves time. 2 weeks, then what? Then we make sure the engineer they choose is actually impartial, and we continue the historical landmark application. Once that's approved, even the county can't touch the pump house. Margaret approached, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Clever, Mr. Hawthorne, but you're only delaying the inevitable. If it's so inevitable, why are you worried? Her smile was ice. I'm not worried, I'm frustrated. You're standing in the way of progress for an entire community because of sentimental attachment to a rotting shed. It's my property, my choice. Now, she leaned closer, her voice dropping. You know what I think? I think there's something in that pump house you don't want anyone to see, something you're desperate to hide. And eventually, we're going to find out what it is. She walked away before I could respond. Ruby was waiting in the parking lot. How'd it go? We got a temporary stay, but they're sending an inspector in 2 weeks. That's good, right? Depends on who they send. I looked back at the courthouse where Margaret was talking animatedly with Commissioner Wells. She's not going to give up. Then neither do we. Ruby pulled out her phone. I've been doing some digging. Want to know what I found? We drove to a coffee shop 3 towns over, somewhere we were less likely to be recognized or overheard. Ruby spread out printouts and notes across the table. Richard Thornwood's company has been investigated twice for fraud, once in California, once in Nevada. Both cases were dismissed due to lack of evidence, but the pattern is clear. He finds valuable land, uses his sister's HOA connections to pressure owners into selling below market value, then develops and flips at massive profit. That's not illegal, but this might be. She pulled out a document. 3 years ago, a property owner in one of Richard's developments claimed he was being harassed. Vandalism, threats, suspicious accidents. He tried to sue but couldn't prove Richard was behind it. 2 weeks later, his house caught fire. Electrical fault, they said. He sold the land to Richard for pennies on the dollar. My blood ran cold. You think they'd go that far? I think they have. Ruby showed me another document. The Yamamotos, remember them? Family who lived here for 30 years before moving out last year. Their teenage son was arrested for drug possession. Crystal meth found in his car. The kid swore it wasn't his, that someone planted it. No one believed him. Family was so humiliated they left town. You think the drugs were planted? The arresting officer was Deputy Frank Mosher. He's married to Richard Thornwood's cousin. Ruby met my eyes. I can't prove anything, but the pattern is there. The Thornwoods want land. Owners who resist experience unfortunate incidents. Eventually, they sell. That's conspiracy theory territory. Maybe. Or maybe it's just good business for people without consciences. She gathered her papers. I'm telling you this so you're prepared. Whatever Margaret and Richard have done before, they'll try again. Watch your back, James. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the Yamamoto's son, his life destroyed by planted evidence, about the mysterious fire, about my slashed tires and vandalized lawn. How far would they go? Around 2 a.m., I heard an engine outside. I looked out the window and saw a truck idling on the street, its headlights off. As I watched, someone climbed out and walked toward my property. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the sheriff, when the figure stepped into the moonlight. It was an old man, 70s, maybe 80s, wearing a flannel shirt and work boots. He walked right up to my front door and knocked. I opened it cautiously, keeping the chain lock engaged. Can I help you? You're Ted's grandson. It wasn't a question. Who are you? Name's Walter Price. I knew your grandfather, knew your great-grandfather too, back when I was a boy. He looked past me into the house. I need to talk to you about the pump house. I studied his weathered face, looking for signs of deception. What about it? Can I come in? This isn't a conversation for doorsteps. I let him in, every nerve on alert. Walter moved slowly, like his joints hurt, and settled into the living room chair with a sigh. I'm 92 years old, he said. Don't have much time left, but before I go, I need to tell you what I know. What your grandfather made me promise never to tell anyone while he was alive. Listening. 1947, I was working as a surveyor's assistant. We were mapping property lines for the county. When we got to your great-grandfather's land, he came out to meet us. Real protective of his boundaries, wanted to make sure we got everything exact. Walter paused, his eyes distant with memory. I was young, curious. While the surveyor was talking to Marcus, that was your great-grandfather, I wandered around the property, found the pump house. Door was unlocked, so I went in. Saw the floor mechanism, figured out how it opened, went down the stairs. My heart stopped. You saw it. I saw it, the pool, the trees, the beings. Walter's hands trembled. Scared the hell out of me. I ran back up, but Marcus was there waiting. He could have been angry, could have threatened me. Instead, he sat me down and told me the truth. Truth, that what's under the pump house isn't just a natural wonder. It's a responsibility, a covenant between the land and the Hawthorne family. The water in that pool feeds the entire aquifer system for miles around. Every well, every stream, every growing thing depends on it staying pure and protected. The water woman told me something similar. Walter's eyes widened. She spoke to you, the guardian? If that's what she's called, yes. Then you're the true keeper now. Marcus said only blood family could hear her voice. That's how the covenant recognizes its protector. Walter leaned forward. Listen to me carefully. Margaret Thornwood cannot learn what's down there. If she does, she won't try to protect it. She'll try to exploit it. How would she exploit water? You know what unpolluted, life-giving water is worth. In a world running out of clean water, that pool could be worth billions if someone could bottle it, sell it, claim it as a commercial resource. Walter's expression was grim. And even if she couldn't profit from it directly, she'd use it as leverage, threaten to expose it, contaminate it, destroy it, anything to force you to sell the land. She can't contaminate it. It's protected. By what? A stone structure and your family's vigilance. That's worked for 127 years, but times change, technology changes. Margaret has resources your ancestors never imagined. Walter stood slowly. I came here to warn you. And to give you this. He pulled a small leather pouch from his pocket and handed it to me. Inside was a key, old brass, ornate, nothing like the one Harold had given me. Marcus gave this to me 75 years ago, said if anything happened to the Hawthorne line, I should find a way to protect the covenant myself. But you're here now, the rightful keeper. This key opens the lower chamber, below the pool, where the source spring emerges from the earth. Walter headed for the door. Marcus showed it to me once, said it was the heart of the covenant. If that's ever breached, everything dies. The pool, the trees, the land for miles around, gone. How do I find this chamber? You'll know when the time comes. The covenant will guide you. He paused at the door. One more thing. Your grandfather fought Margaret for years. It broke his health, broke his spirit eventually. Don't let it break you. You're young, strong. You have allies. Use them. Didn't you come forward before? Testify about what you saw. Walter smiled sadly. Who'd believe a 92-year-old man talking about magic water and underground beings? They'd lock me up. No, this isn't something you can prove in court. This is something you have to protect in secret, the way your family always has. He left. I watched his truck disappear down the street, then looked at the key in my hand. The next 2 weeks were a study in controlled chaos. Margaret's lawyer sent daily letters demanding property access. The HOA issued 14 new violation notices, everything from my mailbox being 3 inches too far from the curb to unauthorized nocturnal activities. Translation, having lights on after 10 p.m. Harold fought back with motions, counterclaims, and eventually a lawsuit for harassment. We're going on a fence, he told me. I'm done playing defense with these people. Structural engineer was selected, a man named Dr. Robert Chen, Ruby's uncle, who'd spent 40 years assessing historical buildings. He's completely ethical, Ruby assured me. If he says it's safe, it's safe. If he says it's dangerous, you'll need to deal with that. But he won't lie for anyone, Dr. Chen arrived on a Thursday morning with equipment cases and a clipboard. He was methodical, professional, and refreshingly uninterested in drama. I'm here to assess structural integrity, he told me. Not to referee whatever dispute you're having with the HOA. I'll examine the exterior, take measurements, and provide my professional opinion. That's all. 3 hours he measured, photographed, and tested. Margaret and her lawyers watched from the property line, forbidden by court order from coming closer. Finally, Dr. Chen packed up his equipment. I'll have my report ready in 3 days. What's your preliminary assessment? He hesitated, then said, the structure is remarkably well preserved for its age. The stonework is solid, the foundation is stable, and while there are minor issues with weathering, nothing suggests imminent failure. But that's preliminary. I'll need to review my data before making a final determination. Margaret looked murderous when Dr. Chen gave her the same information. I could see her conferring with her lawyers, arguing about something. That night my phone rang at 3 a.m. Unknown number. Breathing, then a voice distorted and electronic. Stop protecting it. Walk away. This is your last warning. Is this? Someone who knows what you're hiding. We've seen the lights. We know something's down there. If you don't sell, we'll expose it. Government seizure, scientific study, media circus. Your secret will become the world's property. You're bluffing. I check your email. Call disconnected. I opened my email and found a message from the same unknown source. The subject line, what are you hiding? Inside were photos, night vision images of my property showing faint blue-green light emanating from the pump house. Thermal imaging showing heat signatures in the ground where the cavern lay. Seismic readings showing anomalous activity beneath my land. The message read, we know, sell or everyone knows. I forwarded everything to Harold and Sheriff Morrison, then sat in the darkness trying to steady my breathing. They'd been surveilling my property, using sophisticated equipment to detect what lay beneath. They didn't know exactly what was down there, but they knew something was, and they were willing to weaponize that knowledge. 3 days later, Dr. Chen's report arrived. Harold called me immediately. James, this is as good as it gets. Chen's report states unequivocally that the structure is stable and poses no immediate safety risk. He recommends minor maintenance but sees no reason for demolition. So the emergency order is dismissed? Should be. I'm filing the motion today. Judge Volkov will rule within a week. Margaret won't stop. She won't, but she's running out of legal options. The historical landmark application is proceeding. Your property rights are ironclad. Chen's report undermines their safety claims. She's cornered James, and cornered animals get dangerous. He had no idea how right he was. That night fire, I woke to the smell of smoke. For one disorienting moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then I heard the roar. The garden was burning. I ran outside in my pajamas and bare feet. Flames consumed the old oak trees along the eastern property line, spreading fast through the dry undergrowth. The heat was intense, the smoke choking. I called 911, then grabbed the garden hose and tried to fight the flames. It was useless. The fire was too big, spreading too fast. The pump house, terror shot through me. If the fire reached the pump house, if the structure was damaged, I ran toward it through the smoke. The ivy covering the western wall was already smoldering. The strange blue-green flowers had closed tight, and I could swear they were pulling water up from somewhere, creating a barrier of moisture around the structure. Fire trucks arrived. Sheriff Morrison was right behind them. Everyone back, the fire chief shouted. This is too dangerous. That building. I grabbed his arm. You have to protect that building. If it catches fire, we'll do our best, son, but human safety comes first. It took 4 hours to contain the blaze. By the time the sun rose, half my garden was charcoal and ash. The old oaks trees that had stood for over a century were reduced to blackened skeletons, but the pump house stood untouched. The ivy was scorched, the flowers gone, but the structure itself hadn't taken any damage. It was as if the fire had parted around it, refusing to consume it. Sheriff Morrison found me sitting on my porch steps, covered in soot and ash. "Arson," he said without preamble. "Fire chief found evidence of an accelerant. Someone set this deliberately." "Margaret, can't prove that, but I'm investigating. I've also requested security footage from your neighbors, and I'm suggesting you install cameras on your property. Lots of them." He sat down beside me. "James, this is getting out of control. Whoever did this was willing to risk your life." "Maybe it's time to consider." "No, you didn't let me finish. You were going to suggest I sell or compromise or find some way to make peace with Margaret." I looked at the destroyed garden. "I can't. This place, what's here, it's bigger than me, bigger than property rights or HOA disputes. If I walk away, something irreplaceable is lost." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "Ted said something similar right before he died. He said, 'Some things are worth dying for, Tom.' This land is one of them." He stood. "I thought he was being melodramatic. Now I'm not so sure." The next morning, Judge Volkov issued her ruling. The emergency demolition order was permanently dismissed. The pump house was safe from legal demolition. Margaret's response came that afternoon. Every media outlet in the state received an anonymous package. Inside were the night vision photos, the thermal imaging, the seismic readings, along with a detailed letter claiming I was conducting illegal activities on my property, possibly environmental crimes, possibly something worse. By evening, news vans were back. This time, the questions were different. "Mr. Hawthorne, what are you hiding on your property? Is it true there are unusual light signatures detected underground? Have you been contacted by environmental protection agencies? Are you conducting unauthorized scientific research?" I refused all interviews. The damage was done. The story was out there: mysterious activities on private land, a secretive owner, evidence of something unusual underground. Margaret had weaponized my own secret against me. That night I descended to the cavern. The pool's light was dim, pulsing erratically. The trees looked wilted, their leaves drooping. The water woman surfaced, but she seemed weaker, her form less stable. "Covenant is under attack," she whispered. "We feel it, the fire, the intrusion," the eyes watching from above. "I'm trying to protect you." "No, but the seal is weakening." She looked up at the stone ceiling. "Every probe, every scan, every violation of this space's sanctity weakens the protections. If they push much harder, what happens? The covenant breaks, and we fade, and the land dies with us." Her form rippled. "You must strengthen the seal, keeper, use the key, reach the source, renew the covenant before it's too late." "How?" But she was already sinking back into the pool, too weak to maintain her form. I pulled out the brass key Walter had given me. The key to the lower chamber, the source. Around the pool's edge, I searched for any sign of a keyhole, a door, anything. Nothing obvious. Then I remembered the inscription on the wall: "What is taken must be given." I knelt at the water's edge and held the key over the surface. "I'm the keeper," I said, feeling foolish but desperate. "Show me the way." Water beneath the key began to glow. A path of light extended from where I knelt to the far side of the pool, where part of the stone wall seemed to shimmer and shift. I walked around the pool's edge to that point. Up close, I could see it. A keyhole carved into the rock, hidden behind a curtain of roots and stone that had seemed solid from a distance. I inserted the key and turned it. The wall split open. Beyond lay another descending staircase, narrower than the first, carved from black stone that seemed to absorb light. From below came the sound of water, not the gentle lap of the pool, but the roar of something powerful and deep. I took a breath and started down 90 steps, then 100. The temperature dropped with every step, and the sound grew louder. The walls here were carved with different symbols, older, more primitive, speaking of elements and forces beyond human understanding. At the bottom, another chamber, smaller than the first, but more primal. In the center, water erupted from the earth itself, a spring surging up with tremendous force before flowing through channels carved in the floor and disappearing into the darkness. This was the source, the heart of the covenant. Around the spring, the floor was covered in carvings. I knelt to examine them, running my fingers over words carved in a dozen languages, some I recognized, others lost to time. One section was in English, though the letters were archaic: "Covenant of the Keepers." "Bound in blood, SEALED in stone." "What flows from here, GIVES life." "What protects this place, RECIVES life." "Break the seal, break the world beneath that," spaces for names. I counted them. 5 generations of Hawthorns, each name carved deep. MARCUS Hawthorne, 1897. William Hawthorne, 1937. Robert Hawthorne, 1964. THODORE Hawthorne 1989, and below that, a blank space. Waiting, I pulled out my pocket knife, a gift from Grandpa Ted, carried every day since he'd given it to me when I was 16. Without letting myself think too hard, I cut my palm. Blood welled up, dark in the dim light. I pressed my bleeding hand against the blank stone and said the words that came to me without knowing how I knew them. I am James Hawthorne, keeper of the covenant. I pledge my blood to protect this place. I pledge my life to guard what flows here. I pledge my loyalty to the land and all it sustains. From this day until my last breath, I am bound. Blood sank into the stone. The carved letters filled in, glowing briefly with light before settling into permanence. James Hawthorne, 2025. The spring's roar intensified. Water surged higher and droplets scattered across my skin. Where they touched, I felt energy, understanding, connection. I saw the entire system, the underground river feeding the spring feeding the pool feeding the trees feeding the land feeding the aquifer that sustained miles of forest and life above. And I saw what would happen if it was broken. The vision was apocalyptic. The spring capped or contaminated, the flow interrupted, the pool dying, the trees withering, the land above cracking, drying, turning to dust. And beyond that, the ripple effect, streams drying up, wells going brackish, forests dying, wildlife fleeing or starving, miles of destruction spreading outward from this single point. I understood now why my ancestors had protected this place at any cost. It wasn't just a family legacy. It was an ecological keystone. Remove it and the entire system collapsed. I climbed back to the upper cavern. The pool's light had strengthened. The trees stood straighter. The water woman surfaced again, and this time her form was solid, strong. "Keeper," she said, and her voice held weight it hadn't before. "You have renewed the covenant. The seal is strong again. How long? As long as you keep your oath, as long as you protect this place." She smiled, a sight both beautiful and unsettling. "The land knows you now. It will help you as you help it. How? Watch, and you'll see." The next morning, I woke to find my garden transformed. The burned trees had sprouted new growth, thick, lush, impossibly fast. The scorched ground was covered in new grass and wildflowers. The pump house's ivy had grown back fuller than before, and those strange blue-green flowers bloomed everywhere, their light visible even in daylight, and something else. The boundary of my property, every inch of it, was now marked by a line of those flowers, creating a barrier. A statement. This land is protected. Ruby came by around noon, staring in disbelief at the transformation. "James, how is this possible? This much growth in one night?" "The land," I said simply. "It's helping." She looked at me, really looked at me. "You renewed the covenant, didn't you? Whatever that means. Now the land itself is defending you." Something like that. She laughed, but it sounded slightly hysterical. "We're in a fairy tale. We're in an actual fairy tale, and Margaret Thornwood is the evil witch trying to steal the magic forest. It's not magic, it's older than that, deeper." Now she's going to be more determined than ever. Ruby's expression turned serious. "You know that, right? The more impossible this becomes, the more she'll want it." I knew, but I also knew something else. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. The land was with me. Part 4. The siege. Margaret's next move came 72 hours after the garden's miraculous recovery. This time, she didn't bother with legal niceties. At 6 a.m., I woke to the sound of heavy machinery. I ran to the window and saw 2 bulldozers, a backhoe, and a crew of workers in hard hats assembling on the empty lot across the street. The last undeveloped parcel besides mine, recently purchased by Thornwood Development Corporation. By noon, construction was in full swing. Jackhammers, pile drivers, concrete mixers. The noise was deafening, continuous, designed to make life unbearable, but it got worse. The construction crews worked 18 hours a day, starting at 6 a.m. and running until midnight. They set up industrial lights that blazed all night, flooding my property with harsh white illumination that made sleep impossible. Dust clouds rolled across my land constantly. The vibrations from the heavy machinery rattled my windows and made the walls shake. When I complained to the city, I was told the construction permits were all in order. When I pointed out the hours violated noise ordinances, I was informed that Richard Thornwood had obtained a special variance for essential infrastructure development. "It's a war of attrition," Harold said when I called him. "They're trying to make you so miserable you give up and sell just to escape." "We stopped them. Not legally. They have all the right permits." He paused. "But there might be another angle. I'm looking into whether Richard obtained those permits fraudulently. If I can prove he misrepresented the project scope or timeline, we might get them revoked." "How long will that take?" "Weeks, maybe months." I didn't have months. The constant noise was already affecting me, headaches, exhaustion, and inability to concentrate. And that was just the beginning. 3 days into the construction siege, my internet went out. The service provider claimed it was due to construction damage to underground lines. Repairs would take several weeks. Days after that, my electricity became intermittent. power surges, brownouts. The utility company blamed it on the heavy equipment drawing too much power from the local grid. They'd look into solutions but couldn't promise anything. Then my well water started running brown, not constantly, just often enough to be unusable. When I had it tested, the results showed elevated sediment levels but nothing toxic. Probably construction runoff, the testing company said. Should clear up once they finish building. But they weren't finishing. If anything, the construction seemed designed to never finish. Workers would tear up the same section of ground repeatedly, as if searching for problems. Equipment would break down and sit idle for days before being repaired, only to break down again. It was all perfectly legal, all properly permitted, and all clearly designed to destroy my quality of life. Ruby brought me food and supplies since driving through the construction zone had become a nightmare. "This is insane," she said, watching a bulldozer relocate the same pile of dirt for the third time that day. "They're not even building anything, they're just destroying. That's the point." She looked at the pump house, now completely covered in thick ivy and those glowing flowers. "Is it helping the land? I mean, can it do anything about this?" "I don't know. The covenant protects what's below, but I don't know if it can protect me from this." That night I went down to the cavern. The pool was still strong, the trees healthy, the water woman present and solid. "Keeper," she greeted me. "You are suffering. They're besieging me, trying to drive me away through harassment instead of force. The covenant protects this place, but you are mortal, vulnerable." Her expression was genuinely sympathetic. "We cannot shield you from all harm. The balance must be maintained. We sustain, we do not attack. I'm on my own." "No, but our help has limits." She gestured to the pool. "The water strengthens those who drink it, not with magic, but with vitality, with resilience. It cannot stop the siege, but it can help you endure it." I cupped my hands and drank from the pool. The water was cool, clean, tasting of minerals and something else, something alive. I felt it spread through me, not like caffeine or adrenaline, but like deep cellular energy. My headache faded, my exhaustion lifted, my mind cleared. "It will help," the water woman said. "But ultimately, this battle is yours to fight. We can only give you the strength to fight it." Over the next week, I established a routine. Every morning, I'd drink from the pool. The water kept me functional despite the noise, the lack of sleep, the constant stress. But it couldn't protect my property from the harassment. Someone, I suspected Margaret's people but couldn't prove it, started leaving trash on my property. Bags of garbage, construction debris, even a dead raccoon. I'd clean it up, more would appear the next day. My mail was accidentally delivered to wrong addresses. Important documents disappeared. Phone service became unreliable, and through it all, the construction continued. 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. The lot across the street was being turned into a moonscape of torn earth and concrete foundations that never seemed to progress beyond the foundation stage. "Got something," Harold said during our weekly call. "Richard's permits claimed he was building 3 single-family homes on that lot, but the foundation work they're doing, it's not consistent with residential construction. The excavation is too deep, the foundation too extensive. I think they're planning something much larger." "What does that mean for us?" "It means they lied on their permit applications. If I can prove that, the whole project gets shut down." Harold's voice carried cautious optimism. "I'm filing a complaint with the city planning department. It'll trigger an inspection. If the construction doesn't match the permits, they'll have to stop." "When?" "The inspection is scheduled for next week." Next week felt like a lifetime away. But I held on, drinking from the pool each morning, enduring the siege, waiting for relief. Then Margaret changed tactics again. I came home from a supply run to find Sheriff Morrison's car in my driveway. He was standing on my porch with 2 other people, a woman in a suit and a man with a camera. "James," Morrison said, his expression troubled. "This is Inspector Denise Walsh from the State Environmental Protection Agency. She has some questions for you." Walsh stepped forward, all business. "Mr. Hawthorne, we've received reports of possible environmental violations on your property. Specifically, allegations of unauthorized water extraction and improper wastewater disposal." "That's ridiculous. I'm not—" "We have documentation." She pulled out a tablet showing aerial photos of my property. Certain areas were highlighted. "These thermal signatures suggest unusual water flow patterns beneath your land. We also have complaints from neighbors about strange runoff affecting local water quality." "Those neighbors are lying." "This is harassment from the HOA. Nevertheless, I'm required to investigate. I need access to your property to conduct tests and inspections." "Do you have a warrant?" "I don't need one. Environmental protection regulations give EPA inspectors authority to access properties where violations are suspected." Morrison stepped in. "Actually, that's not quite accurate. You need reasonable suspicion of an immediate environmental threat to bypass warrant requirements." "Do you have that?" Walsh hesitated. "The complaints are unsubstantiated. From what I can see, Mr. Hawthorne's property is healthier than any other lot in Riverside Pines. The plants are thriving, the soil quality is excellent, and I've seen no evidence of contamination. Sheriff, I appreciate your input, but this is an EPA matter. I appreciate your dedication to environmental protection, Inspector. But I've also seen enough of what's been happening in this town to know harassment when I see it. If you want access to this property, get a warrant, or find actual evidence of environmental harm. Walsh's jaw tightened. She looked at me at Morrison at the pump house covered in thriving vegetation. Fine. I'll return with proper documentation, but Mr. Hawthorne, if we do find violations, the fines are substantial. This would be much easier if you cooperated voluntarily. Cooperate with a warrant, not before. After they left, Morrison sat down heavily on my porch steps. They're really coming at you from every angle. It's Margaret, has to be. She filed that EPA complaint. Probably, but the thing is, James, they're building a case. Each complaint, each inspection, each allegation, even when they're dismissed, creates a paper trail, makes you look problematic. Eventually, some judge somewhere might decide you're more trouble than you're worth and rule against you on something. What do I do? Fight smarter. Harold's working the legal angle. You need to work the public opinion angle. Right now, Margaret controls the narrative. You're the difficult property owner blocking progress. You need to change that story. How? Tell people the truth. Not about what's under the pump house, I know you can't do that, but about what Margaret's really doing. The harassment, the siege, the pattern of forcing people out. He stood. There's a town council meeting next week. Margaret's going to present her development plans. You should be there, and you should bring everyone she's hurt. The idea terrified and energized me in equal measure. Go public, tell my story, let people see what the Thornwoods were really doing. Okay, I said. I'll do it. Morrison nodded. Good, because this war of attrition, they're winning. You need to change the battlefield. Over the next 5 days, I reached out to everyone I could find who'd been affected by Margaret's tactics. The Hendersons, who'd sold their home after their teenage daughter was cyberbullied by accounts they suspected were fake. The Yamamotos, whose son's drug arrest had destroyed their family's reputation. The Kowalskis, who'd left after their small business mysteriously failed multiple health inspections just weeks before they were approached with a buyout offer. Most were scared to speak up. The Thornwoods were powerful, vindictive. Going public meant making enemies, but some were angry enough to join me. Mr. Henderson, his jaw set with determination. Mrs. Kowalski, her hands shaking but her voice steady. And surprisingly, Walter Price, the 92-year-old who'd given me the key to the lower chamber. I'm too old to be scared of the Thornwoods, Walter said. And I remember this town before they came. Remember when neighbors helped each other instead of filing violation notices. I'll speak. Ruby organized everything. She created a presentation with documentation of Margaret's pattern, the property acquisitions, the harassment complaints, the suspicious coincidences. She contacted local media, framed it as a David versus Goliath story of long-term residents fighting corporate development. The town council meeting was scheduled for Thursday night, 7 p.m. at the community center. By 6:30, the parking lot was full. By 6:45, people were standing in the aisles. The local news crews were there, cameras ready. Margaret sat in the front row with Richard and their lawyers, her expression one of calm confidence. She thought she'd won. Thought this was just another formality before her development plans were approved. She had no idea what was coming. The council called the meeting to order. Standard business first, budget approvals, permit discussions, zoning reviews. Then they reached the main agenda item, Thornwood Estates' final phase development proposal. Richard stepped to the podium, slick and professional. He presented beautiful renderings of luxury homes, talked about property values and tax revenue, promised jobs and community improvements. Riverside Pines has become a model community, he said. Safe, prosperous, well-maintained. Thornwood Estates represents the culmination of years of careful planning and development. Once the final parcels are acquired and developed, this town will be one of the most desirable addresses in Oregon. He made it sound inevitable, like my property was already his. Then it was my turn. I walked to the podium with shaking hands, Ruby's folder of documentation gripped tight. The room was silent, every eye on me. My name is James Hawthorne, I began. My family has owned property in Riverside Pines for 127 years. 5 generations have lived on that land, maintained it, protected it. And now I'm being systematically harassed to force me to sell so Richard Thornwood can complete his development. Margaret started to stand, but her lawyer pulled her back down. I presented the evidence. The constant violation notices for trivial or invented infractions. The slashed tires, the vandalism, the fire that destroyed half my garden, the construction siege that had been ongoing for weeks, the EPA complaint filed with false information. This isn't normal business practice, I said. This is organized harassment, and it's not just happening to me. Mr. Henderson spoke next, his voice thick with emotion. Our daughter was 15 when the cyberbullying started. Vicious, targeted, relentless. We reported it to the school, to the police. No one could trace the accounts. 2 weeks into this nightmare, Margaret Thornwood approached us with an offer to buy our house. Said she hated to take advantage of our situation, but she understood we might want a fresh start. The timing seemed coincidental. Mrs. Kowalski told her story. The sudden health code violations at their family restaurant found by an inspector who'd given them perfect scores for 10 years. The business dried up overnight. They couldn't recover. When Richard Thornwood offered to buy their property at a fraction of its value, they were too financially destroyed to refuse. Walter Price stood, his voice quavering but strong. I've lived in this town for 92 years, seen it grow from a logging community to what it is now. The Thornwoods came 6 years ago and systematically destroyed what made this place special. They replaced community with compliance, neighbors with property values, human decency with HOA regulations. He looked directly at Margaret. You're a blight on this town, Mrs. Thornwood, and it's time someone said it publicly. Room erupted. Some people applauded. Others shouted objections. The council members looked over well.